Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ with the NFL Draft 3 days away. That means we're approaching the end of mock draft season for another cycle. Mock draft expert Ryan Wilson going to go into hibernation, at least for a couple of weeks. He said he's going to be back doing mock drafts in a couple of weeks for the class of 2025. As you take a look at his latest top 10 picks, you can find the full mock draft over on cbssports.com. And we welcome back Ryan Wilson and former NFL General Manager Rick Spielman. They're here to discuss player comps of the top quarterbacks in the draft, because you can read all the articles, you can watch the highlights, you can break down the mock drafts of these top players, but give me a player to baseline them to. So, Rick, let's start with Caleb Williams, expected to be the top pick on Thursday night. Which NFL quarterback is his best comparison?
Yeah, no, there's no question Chicago has to take Caleb Williams. They wouldn't have traded away Justin Fields if they weren't expected or planning on taking Caleb Williams. He's the most talented quarterback in this year's draft. Watching him on tape, everybody talks about the unique playmaking ability of Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to go outside the box a little bit. And the one area that I think that I saw that was very unique was his ability to put his arm angle at different levers, whether it's over the top, whether it's to the sidearm, things that he does, the no-look passes, everything that I saw Aaron Rodgers do. Every time we played him, it seemed like 200 times when I was with the Minnesota Vikings. But he has some unique ability just to change his arm angle in the way that Aaron Rodgers does down the field. He's always has his eyes down the field, looking for the big play, can make the off-schedule throw. He can use his legs if he has to, but he just has a natural feel for what it's like to complete passes regardless of what's going on around him. So I'm going to go on a different side and go a little bit Aaron Rodgers playmaking ability, what I saw.
Yeah, I love those graphics there. That was the comps made it even clearer. And to Rick's point, Jeremy, Patrick Mahomes feels like the obvious comp, and that's the one that I roll with forever. But Aaron Rodgers is the one that wins out here, in part because, Rick's the general manager. He knows. But also, we heard it straight from the horse's mouth at the Combine. Caleb Williams said, I sort of patterned myself after Aaron Rodgers. Patrick Mahomes wasn't the first words that came out of his mouth. And you saw in those clips there how they are very similar and how they play the game off platform. And I think that's what makes Caleb so special. Also, what makes Patrick Mahomes so special as well. But you can't go wrong with a comp, either whether it's Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers. And if the Bears get 75% of those players, they're going to be going to the playoffs consistently for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and as you point out in your latest mock, the Bears have done a good job putting pieces around him to get ready for him to do just that. Ryan, what about Jaden Daniels up next? What's the player comp, the best player comp for you for him?
Jaden Daniels is a little taller and not quite as heavy as Lamar Jackson coming out, but I don't know who else would be in the conversation. Rick and I talked to Jaden Daniels at the Combine, and he doesn't like to compare himself to other players. You hear that a lot, and I understand that. But who else in this draft class can throw the ball down the field with the consistency Jaden Daniels does? And by the way, Jaden does it better than Lamar did coming out of Louisville. But more importantly, can do in the open field what both those players do. And it feels like unless you're going to compare Jaden to a running back or a wide receiver in space, Lamar Jackson is as close as you're going to get. And again, assuming he goes to Washington, or maybe he goes to New England, you have to be pretty excited about the prospects of having that dual threat quarterback. And if you're one of the defensive coordinators responsible for game planning against Lamar/Jaden Daniels, it's going to keep you up at night. And that's what makes him such an intriguing prospect. And that's why he went from a day 3 prospect, almost certainly coming into the season, to now an almost assuredly a top 5 pick here.
Yeah, when you watch him on tape, all you have to do is go look at the Florida game. He threw for over 300 yards. He rushed for over 200 yards. I talked to a lot of SEC head coaches. They said he was the most difficult quarterback to game plan for, not only because of his ability to throw the ball, but his ability to make big plays with his legs. So I'm going to agree with Lamar Jackson. I mean, it's hard not to compare him to Lamar Jackson coming out. I do agree with Ryan that he is a better thrower than Lamar Jackson was when Lamar Jackson entered the draft out of Louisville.
So if the Commanders pass on him and he falls to the Patriots, if you're a Patriots fan, you got to just be celebrating until the end of the week. End of the weekend, I would say. Ryan, you say he's the most improved player in football over the past 12 months, college football anyways. Ryan, you get to go back-to-back here with yours. Let's talk about Drake May. Who do you have for him as a comp?
So I'm going to steal Rick's comp, but I'll let Rick do the much of the talking about Trevor Lawrence, because in the fall, Trevor Lawrence was the first name that came up for Rick. And I said, it feels like more of a spectrum with Drake May, because when he's on, Trevor Lawrence feels right. But he had his up and downs last year, and we've talked about the reasons why. Worst case scenario, he may end up being Daniel Jones. So I think he's on that spectrum. I can see Rick making faces, even though I don't see him in person. But the physical tools, the length, the arm strength, the ability to make plays in space, you can see here how they're very similar in what they do. And what I keep coming back to, Rick, and what I have to keep reminding myself is Drake May is also 21 years old. The other quarterbacks in this draft class that we talk a lot about, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., Jaden Daniels, are 23 or older. So give Drake May 2 years. He's going to be a much better player 2 years from now. The thing is, you have to be patient with these young quarterbacks, which is hard to do. But I think his 2023 tape was inconsistent, but he has the tools, and we compare him to Trevor Lawrence in this instance, to be a truly special player 2-3 seasons from now.
Well, Ryan, at least you're growing in your comps, and I appreciate your effort to try to at least learn and grow from your mistakes that you have done in the past, because everybody wants to compare him to Justin Herbert, which I could understand some traits there. The reason I went with Trevor Lawrence was because I had an opportunity to see him play 2 years ago live down against Miami of Florida, down in the Hard Rock Cafe Stadium down there. And his mobility, his arm talent, his ability to make plays, I think he's a very underrated athlete. And I think Trevor Lawrence was when he came out as well. But just his game and his style of play reminded me a lot of Trevor Lawrence when I saw him come out of Clemson. I agree. If he can sit a year, it'll help him grow. He may be forced into starting. He may have some bumps early, but this guy has tremendous upside.
I've not heard it called the Hard Rock Cafe Stadium in a minute. So thank you for that, Rick. Appreciate that. I can't tell if this next comp is a compliment or not. So, Rick, walk us through the comp for Michigan quarterback, national champion, J.J. McCarthy.
Oh, God. Here we go again, Jeremy. Just hang on to your seat. This is another guy that's rising up the draft boards. I do like J.J. McCarthy. I think he's a mid-first round talent. Not asked to do all the throwing that all these other quarterbacks have done, but he just goes out there and wins. Won a national championship. He does what the offense requires him to do. I went back to the TCU game 2 years ago in that bowl game, threw 2 pick sixes, but also came back and threw the ball all over the yard to get them back in the game, but they eventually lost to TCU. Jimmy G, to me, was an athletic quarterback that managed the game. I think he has a higher ceiling than Jimmy G, but right now, what you're seeing at Michigan, you have to say he's a game manager, but he has tremendous upside to potentially become more than that, depending on where he ends up in the draft. But if he has time, he can make all the throws at the NFL level. He can throw it deep. He had very good touch and timing underneath and at the intermediate level. And he's, again, one of these players that can make plays with his legs. And when defensive coordinators have to stay up and game plan so the guy doesn't beat you with his legs, I think he can definitely do that.
Yeah, and Jimmy Garoppolo was a better athlete coming out of college than what he's shown the last few years, because he's been so injury-prone. They both have good but not great arms, and this is a really tough comp, Jeremy. It's hard to find someone like J.J. McCarthy, who was asked to do so little over the course of the last national championship season for Michigan, and then get talked about as the top 5 quarterback, because typically we've seen Jim Harbaugh either lean on his quarterbacks. We saw that with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick and got the most out of those players, or if you're trying to hide your quarterback, you lean on the run or the defense or whatever. So this is a different situation. Even the physical tools are hard to translate to a quarterback that we've seen recently in the NFL. So I'm not going to push back too heavily on the Jimmy Garoppolo comp, just because it's hard to find guys that have taken the path that J.J. McCarthy's taken and then turned into franchise quarterbacks at the next level.
Rick, is there a world where J.J. McCarthy gets drafted by his former head coach?
I can't see that. Not when you're given $80 gazillion to Justin Herbert. How can you have that much money tied up in a quarterback position? And if they trade Justin Herbert, then they may set the town of Los Angeles, wherever they're at, on fire, because they have their franchise quarterback, and they're not going to trade him away for a J.J. McCarthy.
They are indeed in Los Angeles, Rick.
Yeah.
They are indeed, yes. Latest mock draft, by the way, has him going 11 to Minnesota. Could be too high based on his tape, says Ryan Wilson. All right, Rick, let's stick with you here. Michael Penix Jr., who do you have for him?
This is a very interesting one. Michael Penix Jr. Was a pure pocket passer, excellent arm talent deep. Everybody's talked about his deep ball accuracy. What he did for the University of Washington since he transferred from Indiana seems to come out clean with all the knee concerns because he had 2 ACL injuries. What surprised everybody, I think, was at his pro day when he was able to run into 4.4s. He has shown that he is a better athlete through this pre-draft process than maybe what you thought when you saw on tape. So my comparison to him would be Jacoby Brissett, who's up in New England right now. And I think that similar as far as being able to throw the ball down the field, similar with the accuracy underneath, I do think he needs to be a little bit more poised when he gets pressure in his face. But his smarts, his intelligence, his experience reminded me a lot of a Jacoby Brissett when he came out of North Carolina State.
Yeah, that one grew on me, Rick. The more I thought about it, the more it makes sense. I know what you're thinking. Thank you for agreeing with me, a person who does a podcast about the draft for a living. But hey, I'm team with the first pick here. I think Tua Tagovailoa is the easy one, Jeremy, because he's left-handed. But the thing when you talk about Jacoby Brissett, he played a ton of football in college. He had that experience coming out. Michael Penix checks that box. He was drafted on day 2, and a lot of teams liked him because of his experience and the things he did well, but he didn't meet the threshold of being a top 15 pick, for example. And we can see Michael Penix slip into the second round. Rick talked about the injuries, and some teams like him but don't love him. And I've heard frequently that he's going to be a steal in the second round, which leads me to believe, well, why don't you just take him in the first and get him there? But we'll find out together in 3 days. But I understand the comp. It makes sense to me. The only difference is one throws left-handed and has a funkier throwing motion, a Phillip Rivers-like throwing motion. But I think Jacoby Brissett, I could get on board with that as a comp for Michael Penix Jr.
All right, and the last one here, producer Jack was telling me, Ryan, that you're very high on evil Patrick Mahomes here, Spencer Rattler.
Evil Patrick Mahomes. I've never heard that. That's fantastic. That's the comp I should have gone with. So this comp is incredibly difficult for me, and I'm sure Rick's going to have some thoughts because if I can see his face now. I'm talking about during the draft process in terms of this comp for Spencer Rattler, because Spencer Rattler was asked to do a lot with a little of South Carolina. He's undersized at 6 feet, has one of the biggest arms in this draft class. He's tough. He's athletic enough, although he didn't test particularly well. So I went with some combination, and this is going to be something that's going to be around forever, if I'm going to say it out loud here, some combination of Matt Corral and Zach Wilson during the draft process, not as they currently find themselves on NFL rosters. Rick, I hope you have a better comp for one of my favorite players, because I have done him a huge disservice with these two comps here for Spencer Rattler.
Well, the show was going so well until we brought up Spencer Rattler, and like every time we talk about Spencer Rattler, the show goes downhill from there. So you keep reaching for straws to find a comp. I still can't figure out what comp you have. I have a trouble finding a comp for him. I went with Jared Hall, who came out of BYU, that was a backup in Minnesota. But, okay, if you want to go with your boy Wilson at the New York Jets, and that's what you think of him, maybe he likes me better than you right now, Ryan Wilson, because you've been carrying his flag for 2 months. And now, all of a sudden, you're jumping off his bandwagon and comparing him to Zach Wilson. Are you kidding me? What are we doing with our lives right now?
Oh, and Ryan,
why is producer Jack showing those clips of Zach Wilson? Show him throwing a touchdown. Come on, man.
I was going to say, did you help him pick the clips here for Zach Wilson?
I did.
Jeez, killing my guy.
Yeah, no kidding. This is going to get clipped to go on social. Have fun, Ryan Wilson, our mock draft expert, former NFL GM Rick Spielman, giving us their top quarterback player comps ahead of this week's NFL draft in 3 days. They'll certainly be discussing everything that's about to happen and everything that does happen on the With the First Pick podcast. You can download and follow wherever you get your podcast audio. The latest episode, you can listen with the scanning the QR code there. It is the top 100 picks up for discussion.